Normally in these book launches, it's by people who've written history or literature. And then they read out passages, they'll tell you what happened at that time, or how the boy approached the girl, or whatever. But what approach we are taking is not to tell you what is in the book, but what is surrounding the book. And not exactly surprising, what Sesh has done is to bring out that picture very well. So in the 10-15 minutes I'll speak, and then Rishi, I'm also going to take the same approach, and I'm not going to tell you anything that is in the book, but what's around the book. All of you are aware of the Bhagavatam, right? I'm not an expert on the Bhagavatam, but there is a particular story in the Bhagavatam which is relevant to this. And that story is that there was a very pretty girl, daughter of the ruling king, and she was imaginative. And in her dream, her name was Usha, in her dream she saw the ideal potential husband. Strong arms, long eyelashes, etc., etc. But when she woke up from the dream, her friend said, "Why are you looking so scared?" She said, "I've seen my future husband. I want to embrace the future." But she said, "Who's he? Where do I go and look for him?" She said, "I don't know. But if you don't get him, I'll suffer and die." And the story goes on. And she really found out that it was the grandson of Lord Krishna. His name was Aniruddha, Pradyumna's son. And she brought him to Usha, and that's the first known recorded case of cohabitation without matrimony. Okay, this is the story in the Bhagavatam. And I'm mentioning the story in this context because when we see something and we have imagined it, we want to embrace it. And what Usha wanted was to embrace this very handsome, gifted, virtuous boy. But when I tell the story, I've done it to three groups of people. One group says, "Oh, that time they knew artificial intelligence, is it?" Because we think that everything was invented in India long before, plastic surgery, artificial intelligence. So they said this is evidence that there was artificial intelligence. The second group says, "What a lovely story. The story is a story." And the third group says, "Well, how can I put some rigor into this in my life? Because I'm not dreaming about handsome boys and pretty girls." And I think if I'm not guilty of converting Madras Management Association into Madras Mythology Association, I thought I will start with a mythological story. Because imagination is the most important part of embracing the future. No, I shouldn't say most important part. It's a very important part of embracing the future. And Rishi will talk a bit to that. So I'm just resetting the context a little bit. How can you imagine what is uncertain, what you cannot embrace? And you could go wrong also. If you follow this book, you will not always get it right. And in the first part, as Sesh has covered, we have talked about related things about carrying people with you and so on. I was once walking around the museum in London, and for a change, most of us go to these museums, we got 2 hours and we walk around and then we come off, we pick up a brochure. But in a particular occasion, I took a guide. I decided to spend a little bit of money and let's see if I can get educated in sculpture, which is not my subject. And there was a beautiful sculpture. And my guide tells me, "Are you admiring it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I'm just thinking, how did he imagine the arms of this person, the thighs and the calves? And how did he hit that so that he could produce this?" So he said, "You seem to be convinced that he has produced this by imagining it and shaping it." I said, "Yeah, is there any doubt about it?" He says, "That's not the way sculpture happens. Great sculptors imagine the block, they figure out what to remove from it. And the residual is what makes the statue or the sculpture. I don't know if that is true. I've never verified it. But imagining the future is about removing what is not required and getting on with what you have to do. Celebrating the past is about keeping what you have and enjoying it. And this is where the challenge comes. When Shesh and Rishi and I began our careers in the late 60s, early 70s, once in a while when a very American style, first 100 days, what did he do and say? We get put under these pressures. And reorganization would happen once in 10 years. But by the time we finished our careers, in fact, as leaders in our own respective areas, we found the damn thing is happening all the time. And metaphorically, it is like raising a child. When our daughters were born, we were very, very busy doing all the things that parents do for their children at that age. But one fine day, when they were 20 or 25 and they were doing their Arangetram in Bhattacharya or got a scholarship to Princeton, you suddenly think with great pride, understandable, that what a lovely thing has happened. So there are two parts to raising a child, as all of us know. And none of us is trained in raising a child, by the way. I've never met anybody who says I've done my PhD in parenting. So when you're raising a child, you have to deal with the immediate. You have to live in the present. You have to remember that the child tends to get cold or cough or whatever from the past. But a mother keeps dreaming. A mother is able to handle short-term and long-term simultaneously. It is almost as though she's got two circuits in her brain and both are 24/7 on. So in spite of changing the nappy, getting the milk and this and that, she's also able to dream that child of hers will become a professor or an engineer or whatever. Men are not so good at it. I must confess, as the husband of one wife, as the father of two daughters and the grandfather of three granddaughters, I must say women's brains work somewhat differently. They are able to deal with short and long term simultaneously. Now, why have I said all this? Because when you're wanting to deal with the past and you want to maintain that tradition, the left brain is very helpful. You have memory, you think about it, and we've always done it this way. When you're living in the present and you have to solve a problem, your brain works in what I call the fluid part of your intellect works. Solving problems in new ways and getting on with it. But as you get older and when you come to leadership positions, you tend to have a better chance of being in a leadership position. You have to rely on what is called crystallized intelligence. If you can imagine a pot of water into which you're putting sugar and you keep on adding 1 spoon at a time and keep stirring it, at some stage it will get saturated. And at some stage it will get super saturated. This is our old chemistry lesson from school. And when it gets super saturated, it starts to crystallize. And this is what happens to us. We are all like an empty pot of water, done our engineering, MBA, accountancy, whatever. And then sugar is put in. Sugar, read, experience. Lessons we've learned from things we have done. They're very unique to you. And it keeps getting stirred. And suddenly you're 40, you're quite different in the taste of who you are. And then more and more gets added. You're now 50, 55, and things start to crystallize. In your brain, these little crystals are sitting, which are products of your own experience. And the great advantage about imagining and embracing the future is that you need a mixture of the raw mind, of the sweet mind, and the supersaturated mind with crystals. It is a place for elderly people, so-called elderly people. I mean, nowadays I don't consider 50 as elderly, but my children laugh at me saying, you're really gone over the hill. So I think this is a very fascinating subject, relevant and touching all our lives, not just in business and enterprise, but even in your day-to-day life. And therefore, we have chosen this heart and mind approach that Shesh referred to. And we actually had an argument, Rishi and I, friendly argument, not like the ones that are in politics. And then we came to the conclusion maybe you need both. Have you ever seen a company succeed because it had a fantastic strategy but did it heartlessly? Probably not. Have you ever seen a nice, gushy, gooey company that was very nice to people but didn't know what to do? So what to do and how to execute are both the left glove and the right glove. I have written the how to do part, which is very often forgotten. You can introduce 3 farm laws which are very well constructed, right? They may be very logical, but then it may receive a certain resistance when you go to implement it. And I love quoting the example of, now that I'm sitting in Chennai, the introduction of Hindi. You know, back in 1951, we adopted Hindi as a national language. There was objection. They said we'll do it after 15 years. You know, and then 14th year, Lal Bahadur Shastri was the president, prime minister. He said, okay, it's been decided, press the button. He pressed the button, and you know, this city was in flames around here. These transformational exercises take time. You can't do transformational exercises in a hurry. You would like to do it in a hurry, but it's difficult. This is what I mean by saying hard. And understanding the pace of change, because every institution has a capacity for change. Tamil Nadu has changed more than Bihar in women going to schools, colleges, coming into the workforce, literacy, health, all that we know. Why? Because you push and various events happen politically which are not the subject for our discussion today. And in Bihar, those embracing the future activities did not take place. Today, there's a very stark difference that you can see. But it's taken how many years? From the time Kamaraj introduced the midday meal scheme, it must be at least 50 years now, 60 years. So I will stop there, and Rishi will take 10 minutes, and then perhaps we can have a conversation between Sesh and all of you. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I too want to thank the Madras Management Association for hosting this book discussion that we have written recently. And I thank Gopal every day for various things we do together and things that he does for me. So I'll skip him now and go to Sheshashai, my dear friend. We were working on the same floor of Hindustan Lever House for 4 or 5 years. And sometimes we used to fight because the brand managers and the commercial accountants were always challenging each other. And it is that spirit of challenge that got imbibed probably in all 3 of us and in numerous other managers. So today is a very nice day for me, though I have to look at all of you virtually. And I apologize for that, but I'm just not well enough to be able to travel. I want to say that, as Gopal said, Shesh has so kindly and so thoroughly read the book that whatever we could tell you about the book, there is nothing more in terms of principles, themes that we wanted to put together. So his 5-point explanation of what is in the book, if we can record it and put it together, then that has been said. So I normally don't do this. I take a opposite or a complementary role with Gopal and explain a little bit more of the book, but it will be repetitive if I were to do it now. So I want you in the audience to imagine yourself. We have been talking about imagination and the importance of imagination. So let's imagine, we don't have to imagine that we are in the present. We are in 2024, we are here. But let us go backwards and think of ourselves in 2015 and then go back and think of ourselves in the year 2000. So when people were in the year 2000, they were looking at 2015 and 2024 as things well ahead in the future, 15 years away, 25 years away, and so on. And when you look at the track record of a lot of companies who were sitting there in the year 2000, who produced online marketplace. Online marketplace did not exist. Today is a $6 trillion market. There are people who created ride sharing, that you could not take a taxi, but the taxi would come to your door and drop you back at somewhere else. That is today a $1.5 billion market. Look at mobile payments, where India is actually a leader in many, many areas to make ourselves a cashless society here. PayPal started it, I think, in about 2010. So it was, and worldwide today, that particular thing is $60 billion. If you look at digital entertainment, that all of us now take streaming as a sort of, something that is every day, that didn't exist. So all of these has been created by people who were sitting around the year 2000 and produce all these miraculous looking businesses, which are all, today we think of them as sort of everyday products. Unfortunately, there is also a flip side to this. That if you look at the threat that change produces or time produces, if you go from 2000 to 2024, you find that 52% of Fortune 500 companies have either been sold, or they have been merged, or they have ceased to exist. So just like I mentioned, some new companies that didn't exist, companies that existed for a long, long time don't exist today. And think of Kodak, think of Nokia, think of Motorola, think of Blockbuster, Radio Shack, and many of those really successful companies in the previous century who in a short span of 10 to 15 years have ceased to exist. So coping with change, dealing with change is something that is both an opportunity and can actually be an existential threat. And for all managers, therefore, it is grasping the opportunity and not take on the threat that takes place. That is why our mindset in writing the book and in trying to communicate our ideas, we chose the word embrace, because embrace is a mindset of going for something that is attractive, that you have been able to see or partly see, and then actually implement that. Future, normally, most of us as people, we tend to be, what's the right word? We tend to be sort of somewhat fearful of the future. We think it's an unknown. We don't want to grapple with it. And a lot of us managers have created a beautiful system by which we fill up our time, all our time, with good things and also some junk, so that we say, oh, but we don't have time to think about the future. But we have come to a stage, we have come to a moment where if you do that, you will go into the Kodak category and not be in the Apple or the Amazon category. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to briefly touch on, because that's a real life issue and real life problem for a lot of us in business, is that when we talk about transformation, what do we understand from the word transformation? Some people think about it as it is really transformation if you have managed to make a difference to the life of your customer. Unfortunately, this is a minority view. The majority view thinks transformation is about inward looking, restructuring, dealing with the organization as if solving the people problems in the organization will give you a big success in the market. And that rarely happens. So you can cut your costs, you can streamline some operations. Those are important. Those are not to be scoffed at. But in our opinion, Gopal and my opinion, those are not real transformation. You have to work on transformation that actually touches the lives of people, not only touches it, but makes a difference to the life of the people. And the biggest single example that I can think of, and all of us, if you touch your pockets, you will find that the biggest single transformation that has taken place in the last 20 years is the cell phone or the smartphone. Because in that one little gadget that has been created, there are 8.64 billion in the last count of these phones. And the most interesting thing for me is 2 billion of them are actually in China and India. US has only 375 million cell phones. Europe has only 400 million cell phones. So the change in the life of people that has been done by that act did not exist 20 years ago. And being able to see that, so the question is, are we actually able to see the future? Are we a palmist? Are we a futurist? What? And no, we are just businessmen who are using our practical experience and our knowledge to find a way, which Hirishi explained very beautifully by saying that if you look at all the change around us, there is probably a way to process that change so that the right things come into your boxes and the irrelevant things are not put into the boxes. Secondly, the change, if it's classified properly, will sit in the right boxes. And then you can see from the societal change, the technology innovation, and the business system innovation that Shesh explained, how to bring them in balance. And maybe during the question and answer session, if some of you want to know how to bring them in balance, Gopal and I can give you a couple of examples of how to do that. So maybe I'll stop here. I hope that's been useful for the audience.